Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn and today I will be flipping the June Spellbinders club kits, and as per usual for my flip videos I'll be making at least one flat, one layered, one interactive, and one pop-up card. And I just about crafted with all of the club kits that I get. So in this video, I'll be featuring the clear Stampin' Die of the month, stencil of the month, the small and the large dies of the month, the stencil, and as well the 3D embossing folder. There are a couple of club kits that I get that I haven't yet crafted with, so stay tuned for more videos featuring this month's club kits. And I do like to show these cards up front because my flip videos are on the long side, so if you don't have the time to watch everything, I totally understand. But you can, now having seen all the 5 cards that I'll be making, you can skip just to that card if you are only interested in seeing me make that one. Without further ado, let's make these. Okay, so I will start off with my flat card. And if you'll notice, I have pulled out a card from my newly acquired color cube. So straight away, I literally did the unboxing video of it just the other day, and this is my first time actually using it for a card. So what I have here is the clear Stampin' Die of the month, and I took the coordinating die that cuts out this, it's kind of like an elongated hexagon with a little bit of a seam, and the stamp is sized and shaped so that it can actually fit on the keychain. But I do love the fact that you can use it standalone and that it has its own die, coordinating die, to cut it out. So what I've done is, using that die, I've cut out a bit of masking paper. It's kind of hard to see on my card front right now because it's white on white, but it's there. And what I'm doing is I am just using some washi tape to tape off bits of my card base, because it's actually quite rare for me to make a truly completely flat card, meaning just the card base and nothing more. My definition of a flat card is at most one layer plus relatively flat embellishments, and sometimes I use that plus to sneak a second layer of cardstock in. But the only purpose of a flat card is just to have an easy mailer, something that's not going to be bulky and you can still ship for the cost of a single stamp. And so what I've done is, now having masked off the areas that I don't want to ink, I am going to ink blend in this sort of ombre, and I've actually reversed, you know, top down the colors on the cube. But I was surprised. I found colors that actually match that color cube card pretty well. And the reason why I reversed it is because I kind of figured the coral color up top would be kind of like a sunset, and then the blues at the bottom will be like the water, the ocean. And then in the center, there's, you know, that little dolphin tail. I thought that sort of grayish blue in the center was sort of like a dolphin fin kind of gray. And so that was my thinking. Now, I'll be honest, I actually made this card a second time, so what you see at the end is pretty much exactly the same as where this card is headed. The only thing is that when I got to this point, I stamped this onto acetate in order to try to position my stamping so that it's exactly centered. Well, I somehow nudged it. I moved it a little bit and it didn't end up being exact. And I like how this card turned out so much but it was bugging me a lot that the stamping is not centered. So I redid the whole thing, and I'll be quite frank, flat cards, like 100% flat cards for me, I pretty much rarely ever do. And I really like this one. It's actually pretty quick to do. So I'm not sure why I don't create completely flat cards more often, but this might be, I don't think it is, but it might be my favorite card that I make in this video. It's pretty darn up there. Okay, and I will give another close-up look of that at the end too. So onto my layered card. Again, I've got another color cube card. You're going to see it featured a few times in this video because, well, I'm very anxious to just use it and, kind of put it through its paces. And so you'll be seeing it more and more in my videos, but I was particularly enthusiastic about using it because I just got it. And so for this card, I will be featuring the stencil of the month. And this is going to be the first of 2 layered cards. So with the stencil of the month, it's kind of interesting because there are 5 stencils that you get. 3 of them I'll be using on this card because they are actually combined, let you color up a background of beach balls, which is kind of fun. And so what I thought I would do is do some ombres. And so this particular color cube card, I randomly picked these. Actually no, I did not randomly pick this one. What I did was, so the color cube is kind of hard to just search when you're looking through the physical box, but what I've taken to doing is I'll actually use the PDF file that's on my phone, which is searchable and interactive. And so I searched for teal, and then I picked, the color cube card number that I wanted, and then I physically brought the card out. So the nice thing about using it in this way is that with the digital format, I can kind of do searches and it's interactive and I can more easily browse. But I like having the physical card right next to me as I'm crafting, because then I can kind of see if my colors are matching and I don't have to keep on tapping my phone to keep the screen alive. So I've been really enjoying using the color cube so far. Now, the second layer was just the second color stripe of these beach balls, and I did do another ombre. So the first ombre was from green to teal, the second one is pink to purple, and the third stencil puts the little kind of like the little dot where you would blow up the beach ball kind of at the ends of it. And what I did there was I just combined the purple and teal to have a slightly darker purple, and that way you can still see it. I've got a this is, I think it's called Neptune is the color, but it's a very, very dark purple blue. I think it's more in the purple range. And so if you look now, this isn't one of the actual colors in the color palette, but looking at the photo inspiration for this palette, you can see like some really, really dark areas of a very dark purple or very dark blue. So I'm pulling in some of those colors as well. And then what I'm gonna do is grab a sentiment from the clear stamp of the month. And the nice thing with the clear stamp of the month is that the coordinating dies do have dies that will cut out all of the sentiments, as well as that large keychain and the little scenes that you can stamp onto the keychain. So that's really cool. But what I thought I would do initially was just add the sentiment and kind of be done. Kind of keep this pretty simple. But I decided to add more to it. So once I get my sentiment stamped out, I'm going to die cut it, and then I'm going to die cut a second time to have a little bit of a shadow layer so that the sentiments actually kind of pops off of the card a little bit better, because it's a pretty busy background. And I think that's why I decided to add more to this, because there's quite a lot of color going on, but I do love using the color cube because all of that went really well together, and it's a neat combination. It's not too far out of my comfort zone because I do craft a lot with teals and purples and pinks and greens, and so this was a very comfortable color palette for me. Now, originally I created the umbrella, or I should say I assembled the umbrella out of pink cardstock that I made using the same ink that I stenciled with. But looking at it, I didn't like how that turned out because the pink umbrella actually lands in an area, stenciled area that's also pink. So I felt like it kind of blends into the background a little bit too much. So what I'm going to end up doing is recreating that umbrella, but out of purple. And I'm going to do the exact same thing for this lounge chair. I'm going to make my own cardstock using the same color that I stenciled with the beach ball background. That way everything coordinates 100%. I don't have to worry about trying to find a solid color cardstock that matches my inks. I can just make my own cardstock. And the little lounge chair is really cute. You actually get two in the large die of the month, and they face each other. So you can actually put two together on a scene and have them feel very naturally together because they are facing each other. And it even comes with this little stripe detail that you can add so that it kind of has that alternating stripe pattern. Now, originally I put this onto, it actually is, I think lightweight chipboard, some extra chipboard that I had. It kind of looks like craft color cardstock, but ultimately, again, I decided against that, so I quickly peeled that off, and I am going to die cut the chair frame again in black. So this is one of those cards where I started down the direction and kind of backtracked a couple times. This was one of them. So swapping out for the darker color, I feel makes everything pop a little bit better than that craft color did. And that's often the case when you're using bright colors or a lot of colors. Having some darker colors to really have that contrast makes those bright colors pop even more. And so I think that's what the black helps to achieve. And so at this point, I was still thinking I would use that pink umbrella, but I pulled out all of the umbrella pieces again, also from the large die of the month, and I put together another umbrella. And I think this goes much better because now that umbrella is, it pops off of the background much, much better because there's more contrast, especially since that pink umbrella used the very same pink ink as what I stenciled with. So I'll save that. I'll just use that on a different card. And as well, I'm going to, as I mentioned earlier, pop, I actually cut this again, the sentiment. I did put some foam on there just now, but it didn't pop enough off of the background of this panel. So, you know, I don't go into these card making sessions with a firm plan of exactly what I am going to do. A lot of it is just, I have an idea enough to get started and then I start. So the little, idea that I had for this card was just to do an ombre of the stenciling and to use a color cube card. And then the rest is just, wherever the card design takes me, and whatever it needs is what I end up doing. So I don't know how everybody else crafts, but I never sketch out a card. But when I sit down to start creating, I just go with that initial idea until I hit another element and figure out from there what else my card needs. So now onto my second layered card, and here I've got the 3D embossing folder. Now, I wasn't 100% sure of what I was doing, so I've just got this little bit of scrap copper. This is a satin mirror card, and I'm inking up my folder with some Versified ink, which is a really nice pigment ink, and I did the unboxing of the Spellbinders Club Kits, and I remember thinking that this 3D embossing folder, it's citrus. It's citrus slices, like orange slices, lemon slices, etc. But when you look at it kind of in the abstract, you could probably see flowers out of this. You could see pinwheels. You could see gears. You could see a lot of things. It's a nice all-over pattern. And I wondered if I could make this a little bit steampunky. And so what I wanted to do was just test out what it would look like to emboss and put some darker colors into those recesses. Because it was a little bit unknown for how it would turn out, that's why I embossed first on a bit of scrap paper. So I always encourage, if you don't want to mess up some really nice specialty card, just maybe cut off or use a bit of scrap and then and test that first. So then I've got this stays on glaze in some teal and as well in a really nice brown. And I am just going to rub a little bit of this on so that it kind of starts to give this this copper a bit of a patina. And the 3D embossing is so deep. There's actually a bit of that corner that just tore off because it was such a deep emboss. But I'm gonna continue to just using my finger rub this these two colors in. So with the teal, I'm trying to keep that to the more raised areas, and then with the brown, I'm going into the areas that are a little bit flatter, so they're a little bit more in the distance. And by putting the darker color there, it really just pushes that back even more and makes it look even more 3D. And of course, that's the beauty of a 3D embossing folder is because when it does the emboss, it's multi-level. So some things are going to feel and look more raised, and some things are going to not be as raised, and so they look like they're further in the distance. I did give that panel some time to dry overnight, and then I added a bit more teal on top just to give it even more of that patina. So now I've got some scrap cardstock that I'm going to try to create a little bit of a wood grain effect. If you have wood grain pattern paper, that would probably be faster and easier. But I've just pulled out a lot of my browns and tans, and I'm just gonna layer and layer and layer until I have the look that I want. Now, what is helping is that I'm actually using a combination of different inks. So these are all Tsukaneko inks, but they're different in the sense that I'm using a dye-based ink, which is the Memento line of inks by Tsukaneko, and I'm using a chalky pigment ink, which is the Versa Magic ink. And the beauty of the combination of the two is that the Memento ink That's going to soak into the papers, and essentially it's not going to blend all that much. But the pigment ink, since it sits on top, it's going to allow me to kind of cover up some of those harsh, lines, which I'm using as the wood grain lines of the darker Memento ink that I just sort of swiped onto that panel. And it helps to kind of push that back a little bit, blend it in a little bit, and so you get a little bit of this sort of wood grain effect. And you can keep going with this until you've got built up the amount of texture that you want. I wasn't looking at any sort of reference for any particular types of wood, but certainly you can try to actually match a particular color or style or type of wood if you wanted. I just wanted something that had some texture to it and looked a little bit like wood. And the effect I'm going for is that this is a wood keychain that's maybe the detail has been burned into it, like the design has been burned into it. So I've just smushed out some of that same, and I think I took the same colors of the Versa Magic in the darker inks, and I'm going to just do a little bit of coloring with it. Just gave it a nice spritz of water so that I can paint with it. And I just did a little bit of selective coloring. I wasn't trying to really color everything in. Just wanted to give some areas a little bit of color so that there's some contrast. And so now for the key, because it was cut from that same sort of wood grain paper, but it doesn't really make sense for the key to be wood. But all the same, I did want to color it up a little bit differently though. But I stuck to browns because I thought it would be weird to bring in a different color at this point, because everything is this very earth tone kind of natural coloring. One thing that I thought was interesting though is I used alcohol markers and I colored over top of this panel that had a lot of that chalky pigment ink, which probably wasn't even 100% dry yet. And it had this really cool effect of helping to blend that alcohol ink really nicely. I'm gonna have to intentionally do that again. Just having that base layer of that chalky Versa Magic ink and then coloring over top of it, the ink moved in a way that it doesn't normally move if you were just to color onto paper. So I thought it was really cool, and the effect of it was kind of neat, and the blending of it was so nice too. So I'm gonna play with that as a technique more, but it was a happy little discovery here. So now I've got this postage rectangle nested shape die set from Spellbinders, and I have never added so many mats and layers to a card before. And but I felt like I wanted to, it just kept going because I felt like I wanted to bring a little bit of that teal out of that copper panel that I worked so hard to create, but a lot of it's gonna get covered up. And so I wanted this base layer of the teal, and for a similar reason, I wanted some really nice dark browns to really frame and anchor everything, but then it felt like it was going to be too dark, and so I brought in a lighter cream color to matte on top of that just to lighten things up a little, because otherwise there wasn't going to be enough contrast. Everything was going to be kind of mid-tones from there. And once I started with this dark matte of that postage stamp border, I just had to keep on replicating it. Now, if I had thought about this card in advance, I would have die cut my copper panel first, and then 3D embossed it, and then did all of that technique on top of it. Because the order that I did it in meant that I had to die cut it after it was already embossed, so it did flatten out a little bit, my embossing. Now, you could, if you wanted to take an extra step and like re-emboss it again to reintroduce that texture, but I didn't think it was worth doing, especially since it's just, an element in the background of my card. And because I had done all that stays on glaze, there still looks like there's a lot of depth, even though it has flattened out a little bit. But because there's that dark ink in those areas that are a little bit more recessed, it still looks very, very dimensional. And so I've got my key all framed up here at this nice fun little wonky angle. And again, I'm gonna actually double matte my sentiment, because I totally forgot too that that there was the coordinating die, which I didn't end up using. But in any case, I was gonna have to cut these mattes because I wanted them to actually go all the way around the sentiment, not just like a drop shadow. That way it actually frames it. And that way I could also bring back some of that teal to the foreground. So now I've got the teal in the sentiment border all the way in the foreground. I've got a little bit of that teal as the patina in the midground, which is that copper panel. And then I've got the teal all the way as that very, very first bottommost matte layer. And so this card, the card front is actually pretty heavy because of all of those layers. I wish I had started with a heavier card base, but I like how it turned out a lot. This was a really fun card for me. Very, very outside my norm. Okay, so now with my interactive card, I've got these really cute, super cute, ice cream cones here. They are really adorable. Originally, I cut them out of this darker cardstock, but I actually ended up finding this really nice tan color cardstock, which I was looking for but couldn't find initially, but eventually I did find it, and so I recut all of my ice cream cone pieces. And these are from the Small Die of the Month, which actually has a couple of different things that you can create as dancing characters. So there's a hippo that you'll see later on my pop-up card. There's the ice cream cone, which I'm using on this card, and there's the watermelon slice, which I didn't use at all yet. But again, you can see I've pulled out another color cube card, and I thought for a second I might actually have one of the ice cream cones be the original color that I had cut it out of. Kind of like, but I don't even know if it's something that exists, but I was thinking that maybe one of the cones could be like a chocolate flavored ice cream cone, but I don't know if those actually exist. And so I decided to just cover it up in the end. I actually asked my husband what he thought of it, because I thought it was kind of cute to have them be two different colors, but he thought it looked odd. So, and then once he pointed it out, I thought, okay, yeah, I think I agree. So I've added those, and you can see on the cone portion, there's a hole cut out of the top. And that's where you would put a foam dot if you wanted to make this ice cream cone dance. So what would happen is that the dancing mechanism allows for the body and the legs, or the lower portion of this ice cream cone, to swing back and forth, because it basically is going to hang on this foam dot and not actually be glued down to anything. And, but when I positioned these two next to each other, I thought, wouldn't it be cute if they were holding hands and then they could swing back and forth together? But then I realized, well, they can't swing back and forth together if they are each on their own foam dot. So then I had to peel up the two foam dots, and of course, I use liquid adhesive, because I always do. If it's an interactive mechanism, I want to use a nice strong adhesive to really make sure that foam dot stays on the card. So I had to peel up those two. I managed to save one of them, but the other one I did have to tear up pretty badly. So I won't be able to use that. But what I've got here is a bit of strong acetate, thick acetate. It's actually packaging from a purchase. And I used a die, and I think I ended up bringing it on screen later. It's the large die of the month from, I think, September of last year, to cut out this circle. And it's just big enough. This circle is just big enough so that I can hang it onto this large foam dot here. And then attached to that bit of acetate, I've glued both of my ice cream cones. So now what's going to hang on a foam dot is that acetate, which has both ice cream cones connected. And of course, I had to peel off the foam adhesive that I put onto the ice cream portion of these ice cream cones, because now that needs to be positioned a little bit differently. And so I'm just testing this out to make sure that it's going to swing the way that I want. The original thinking was I was actually going to glue the heads to the foam dot, because that's what you would normally do. You would normally glue the head to the foam dot so that the head stayed stationary, and it's just the legs that would swing back and forth. But that looked really strange to me when I was just holding it and swinging it back and forth. Like, with the head stationary, it looked really strange. So what I'm gonna do is I am just going to glue a bit of scrap cardstock on top of that foam dot. Something needs to get glued there to lock that acetate and the body of our ice cream cone. It needs to lock that in place so that it hangs and it can freely swing back and forth, but it's not going to just, come off of your card, because that cardstock, that bit of scrap cardstock is going to basically keep it in place there. So now what I can do is I can, just using a little bit of foam, I can actually attach the heads to that acetate, and that way it's positioned like in a way that makes sense relative to the body, relative to the ice cream cone. And when it swings, they all swing together. The entire ice cream cone, both ice cream cones, all swing together. So I think, this actually turned out a little bit better than what I was originally planning for this card. Because I was planning that the two ice cream cones would independently swing by themselves. But I like that they're holding hands, and I like that they've got their heads tilted into each other. I think it's just really cute. And of course, I have not thought about the sentiment until now. So originally I was going to use the sentiment chill, but now that, there's this little couple and they look so sweet together. I didn't think chill worked quite as well as a sentiment anymore. And so I die cut from the small die of the month the words happy day. And I thought about using that as the sentiment, but it's big. It's bigger than what I feel looks good for this card. I wanted something like kind of understated, so I've pulled out the stamp of the month, and it just so happened there's this perfect sentiment. It actually says, let's be adventurous, which I thought was really, really cute, because it's like these two ice cream cones, they're like, you know, holding each other's hand, swinging back and forth, like they're kind of getting ready for a grand adventure together. So I thought that was really cute, and in a very quirky way, you could almost use this as an engagement card. You know, I think it's kind of cute. It would have to be for a couple that that would find it funny, but I think it's just really sweet. So now, of course, if you were planning to do this card, I would definitely stamp the sentiment first, because stamping it at this point when everything's done, it took a lot to get to this point, messing up would be very sad. And plus there's all that foam. There's all of that foam on underneath the heads of the ice cream cones. But that's what a good stamp positioning tool is good for. So in the end, it all worked out just fine. Okay, so now my last card. This is my pop-up card. So I'm going to start off with stenciling a cloudy background. And I am going to, again, admit that I did this card a second time because when I finished this card, and this will sometimes happen with a pop-up card, sometimes you'll find that you add so much to the inside of the card that the card front doesn't feel sturdy enough as you're opening it. And that was beginning to feel the case with this card. And so I ended up stenciling another panel, pretty much, identical, and just gluing it right over top. Now, I forgot to mention at the beginning, I used the Glimmer of the Month too. That's where the big hello on this card front, that's from the Glimmer of the Month, which was all sentiments this month, which I think was fabulous. But I love the stencil of the month has, as I mentioned, 5 different stencils. Now, the first 3 that I used on my earlier card, my flat card, those all kind of coordinated to create a single background. Now, the next 2, they can be used kind of independently to create more backgrounds. So in this case, I used the clouds to just create this sort of cloudy sky. There's another one that you can use to create kind of a landscape almost. And for my pop-up cards, I like to keep the front of the card nice and simple. So that's all I'm going to do with that. Now time for the actual pop-up mechanism. This is just some blue cardstock, and I would recommend something maybe in the 100-pound range. This is, I think, Spellbinders Splash cardstock. And what I've done is I have cut this to just, it's actually a smidge. It's not quite the full width of my card, which is an A2 size card. It's like a fly's eyelash less than 4 1/4, just because I wanted to really make sure that it all fits here. Okay. And so what I'll be making is a platform pop-up card. And so I have scored this this piece ends up being, let's see, it's 3, it ends up being 6 inches long by 4 1/4, or just shy of 4 1/4. And so along that 6-inch edge, I score it at 1 inch, 4 1/2, and then 5 1/2. And then the leftover 1/2 inch is a glue tab. So the two panels on the ends will be glue tabs. And right now I just have them temporarily taped down, just so that I can see, how the platform looks as I create the elements that will be part of the scene that pops up when you open up this card. So here again, I've got some elements from the large die of the month. So I've got that lounge chair, the beach chair again. And I've got, now this is really cool. The large die of the month has this kind of a mound of sand. It can be like a little island of sand if you want. And I thought it would be cool to have it in, this, the blue cardstock is going to be basically, my ocean, my water. And I think it's really adorable that this die set has this floaty. And so the characters are designed so that you can actually put them inside the floaty. And so even the ice cream cone, you could do that because it's got the arms, and the hippo also has the little arms that you can have hanging on top of the floaty. And when I did the unboxing, there were these extra pieces and I didn't understand what they were for. And I looked it up later, and they are so that you can turn your floaty into different animal characters as well. So you can make a little ducky floaty, and you can make a turtle floaty. It's so cute. Now those aren't going to work out for how I'm using it, but I just think they're really fun options. And I'm glad that you can still use the floaty as just a plain floaty. Okay, so what I am doing here is, this is that panel that I mentioned that's 4 1/4 by 6, and I've scored along the 6-inch edge at 1 inch, 4 1/2, and 5 1/2. And what I'm going to do is cut slits where I want items in my scene to pop up. So I want, when you open this card, I want this island of sand to pop up and be vertical. And so I've cut some slits because this bit of sand here, it's got, you can see the curvature. So basically all I'm trying to do is match that curve, match the width of that curved section so that it can slot down into, fit down into the slot. Technically, if you didn't want to do that, all you need is to create maybe 2 slits that are wide enough for a couple of acetate stands like what I'm using here. And you can just trim off your island so that it's flat at the bottom there. And then you don't have to worry about making sure this recesses nicely into that slit. So now what you want to do when you're making your little pop-up stands is every pop-up stand needs to have a glue tab. I like to use about 1/2 inch as a glue tab. Then every pop-up stand needs to extend 1 inch up, because that's how tall our platform is. It's 1 inch tall. And then whatever else you need beyond that is just enough to glue your element onto. And so those are the generalized tips. So I'm cutting each of these pieces to fit as I'm sizing this for this island piece. So that's why I'm not giving you exact measurements. I'm just telling you the method for how to figure it out if you decide to make a similar card. So, I remember when I said in making that pop-up platform, that first score line was at 1 inch. Well, that determines the height of your platform. So whatever that 1 inch is, your pop-up stand needs to stand up an inch as well. And then that brings it to the surface of the platform. And then the next score line on our platform is basically, the depth of the platform. And that line I scored at 4.5 inches. And then the third score line on this mechanism piece was at 5.5, which is 1 inch away from the edge of our platform, because the platform has to go down again by that same height, which I just arbitrarily decided would be 1 inch. So if you wanted to make a taller platform, if you wanted to make a shorter platform, totally up to you. That part is pretty arbitrary. All you need to make sure of is when you create your pop-up stands that you have a glue tab, about 1/2 inch glue tab. Whatever the height of your platform is, you want to add that. And then on top of that, you want to add a little bit extra, however much you need to secure your element to that pop-up stand. So I've done the same thing for my hippo here. I cut a slit into my platform, and I just made sure that I can fit my hippo through it. And technically, if you didn't care, you don't really need to put the lower half of the hippo. You don't have to actually assemble the lower half of the hippo, because really, it's visible, but it's only visible if you look behind there, if you look underneath the platform. But I thought just for continuity, it would be cute to keep it in. So I've got all of my elements. I've got all the slits cut into my platform. Now I'm gonna start to put things together a little bit. So I've got a bit of light blue cardstock that I glued to the top of the inside. This is a top folding A2 card, so it measures 4.25 by 5.5 with the fold at the top. And I cut a bit of blue cardstock to be my sky. You don't have to cut this all the way the full 5.5. There's a little bit of white that's showing because that's going to get covered by our mechanism here. So now when I glue this down, what I'm making sure to do is I don't want to cross over the score line in my card base, because if you do, it's going to be challenging to close this down flat again. And now, I'll be honest, it had been a while since I've made one of these, and so I wasn't super confident about my pop-up stands. Otherwise, I would have done this a little bit in a different order. But what I've done is folded along it's the second or the middle score line. You want to fold on that. And you want to put adhesive only on that last 1/2 inch where I've got the line of score tape there, and then close it down completely. Close down your card completely, and that will naturally glue or attach itself where it needs to. And now we have the base. Now we have the platform that the scene can be created. Now the thing is that I did not glue down my pop-up stands. And sometimes that's okay to do, mostly because you can still kind of get your fingers under the pop-up stand, under that platform to glue them down. But it is a lot easier if you glue it down, when everything is open, the same time you're gluing down that front edge of your platform. But there's nothing wrong with doing it this way. Just make sure, because everything's been cut, to the right height and everything, it should all work out and it should all fold down nice and flat. And it just took a little bit of extra time to get these into position, and it was a little bit awkward getting the adhesive liner off of those glue tabs. But otherwise, it worked out okay. And that's why you see me kind of fidgeting so much with this, because it's so hard to kind of get that off. But here's how it looks when it's attached. You can see it's got, the stands are there. They're folded and glued down to the card base. And they're folded backwards so that when this card closes, those glue pop-up stands, they basically flatten out. They basically unfold. And then when you open the card, it's when they're folded, or when they have a bend in them. And that will help it to actually fold down more flat. So when you go to glue down your pop-up stands, you just want to make sure that the glue tab is pointed towards the fold of your card. And so it's basically folded backwards. And then, you can kind of continue to add little things to your scene. So I added the little beach chairs. I added the clouds that are from the large die of the month as well. And with the clouds, I like to hang them like right off the edge. That way it just looks like it's part of a larger scene. And I snipped off one of the larger ones, and then I just rotated it, and I used the leftover as another little bit of cloud. So the other thing last minute that I decided to add was, there's this die that cuts out the foam. When the water sort of crashes against the sand and then starts to kind of go back into the ocean, you have that foam. And so I thought that's such a neat little detail. And so I've added that to the scene as well. Okay, so here's a final close-up recap. So you can see I've stamped this out much more evenly. I'm so much happier with it now. This is a really fun little technique. You could do that with any stamp that you have. So that was a lot of fun to do. This is the first of 2 layered cards featuring the stencil of the month and the large die of the month for the beach furniture, and the sentiment is from the clear stamp of the month. Then I have a second layered card, and this one has a lot of layers to it. I tried to go a little bit more kind of vintage, grungy a little bit, and so I've used the 3D embossing folder and as well the clear stamp and die of the month for that keychain. And you can see how you can stamp that that little scene right into your keychain there. Then for my interactive card, I made a dancing card, but I took the 2 ice cream cones and kind of, instead of making them dance independently and each swing back and forth, I've attached them and made a new dancing mechanism so that they can swing back and forth together. And the sentiment is from the clear stamp of the month. Then my final card is my pop-up card. Here's that new cloudy background that I stenciled using the stencil of the month. The hello is foiled from the glimmer of the month, and I did use one of those small solid foil plates to get the reverse foiling. And I don't think I showed it on camera in my process, but I did add a foiled sentiment to the front of my platform just to have a nice inside sentiment. And the reason why my platform isn't fully the depth of the card is so that white space in front of it, you still have space to sign the card. And so this is just a fun little pop-up scene with the hippo in his little floaty and the island and little beach chair and umbrella. So lots of fun. Really been a long time since I've made one of these platform pop-ups, so it took longer than I thought it would, but I really loved how it turned out. If I do have another video, I think, on my channel of just that card, so if you want, you can check out that video. But I actually might do another video just to do that platform mechanism again. Thanks so much for checking out my video today, and if you have a favorite card among these 5, let me know in the comments below. Until next time, happy crafting and have a fabulous day. Bye!